Ya enggak, tanda panah. Mohon izin Bapak Ibu yang di Zoom, apakah terdengar?
Iya, terdengar, Mas. Satu, dua, tiga. Begini. Ya. Oke, suara aja sih.
Udah ada suaranya ya?
Iya.
Before we proceed further, let us start this event with a prayer from blessings from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. The prayer will be led by Mr. Muhammad Zulhan and Dr. Eksan. Mr. Zulhan, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before we start the agenda, let us bow our head to pray to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. The prayer will be conducted in Islamic way for the non-Muslim believer is to adjust. Biwarakati Ummil Quran Al-Fatihah. Ya Allah jalali wa ikram Allahumma sholli ala sayyidina Muhammadin fil awwalina wal akhirin wa barik wa sallim wa radhiyallahu ta'ala kulli sahabati rasulillahi amin 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 ya rabbal alamin hamdan syakirin hamdan na'imin hamdan mulafiyan wa wa'atin mazidah ya rabbana alhamdulillah khair syukur kama ibad fi jalla wajhika karim sultan Allahumma sholli ala sayyidina Muhammadin salatan tunjina biha min jamil ahwali wa afat wa taqaddilana biha min jamil hajat wa tahhirna biha min sayyi'at وترفعنا به عندك على درجات وتباركنا بالعطايا من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم إنا نسألك سلامة في الدين وعافية في الجسد وزيادة في العلم وبركة في الرزق وتوبة قبل الموت ورحمة عند الموت ومغفرة بعد الموت اللهم هون علينا في سكرات الموت ونجاة من النار وعافية من الوسائل ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا يوم في دينك وطاعتك وإنك كنا من الظالمين يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا يوم في دينك وطاعتك وإنك كنا من الظالمين يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا يوم في دينك وطاعتك وإنك كنا من الظالمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to the opening remarks. The first speech will be delivered by Dr. Fahrudin M. Jaya SFE, the Dean of the Faculty of Biology and Agriculture and the Chairman of the Center for Islamic Studies, Universitas Nasional. Dr. Fahrudin M. Jaya, the floor is yours.
Dari aja kan bingung dari.
Tiga baris, bukan tiga huruf bukan cuma tiga koma.
Belum Pak, apa nih? Belum Pak.
HP dengan cas HP bukan. Saya ada penganjal HP untuk saya bilang. Ya bisa aja kan pakai mata botol. Iya.
is increasing 1.1. Di 1,1 derajat bertambah dari sebelumnya. If we say in 1990, the global degree of climate is globally 15 Celsius degrees global. However, now increase to 16.1 globally. However, the science suggests, because we are suggested by science-driven policy, we have to stop that increase, only tolerate to 1.5. That is why Paris Agreement being conducted in 2015, where all the states and the nation, or 200 nations, have been signed to reduce the emission to halt the global climate change. Our effort is likely be going to increase the temperature up to 1.5 and more, perhaps up to 2 degrees. Right now, from 11 to 21 November, in Baku, Azerbaijan, there is about 168 countries conducted a conference called Conference of Parties on the UNFCCC, United Nations Convention on Global Climate Change, to negotiate how we avoid, how we get out of the climate. Diki was attending last week. From Baku, Azerbaijan. I went to same conference last year and last 2 years. I did as well in UIA in Dubai last year. We're talking about something, how to handle the climate change. That's why the first time in the world, the faith pavilion are present. And today, we are together here to discuss the role of religions and ethics in keeping handling of climate crisis. We will hear a competent speaker to see how ethically we hear how ethically human being, particularly the religious followers, being ethics and to face the climate problem and to change the behavior. The most particular climate issue is related with ethics and moral. Ethics can be behaved as moral if it is become a collective. That is why the religion is present here. In the Muslims, we going to have Professor Iing Alimatul Sahya from UIN to present today. Happy to have you there to present about the Green Islam. It is more practical ethics. But yeah, because ethics is coming from the heart and mind of the people. And moral can be collected after that. And we have also Professor Azizan Baharuddin from Malaysia, which is also from MASA, Malaysian Sustainable Masa Depan Malaysia. My colleague, she is a drafting scholar of Al-Mizan, a new document released by the Muslim world for responding to the climate and also the environmental issues. So if you are in Christianity, you have Laudato Si. I hope today all will mentioned regarding that. Ethics. And we have now also Al-Mizan, which is translated as balance. Al-Mizan. And our Center for Islamic Studies, translating formally been asked by team members and also a team member of Scholar Branding team, Al-Mizan, together with Al-Mizan and other 7 or 11 scholars from around the world, Muslim scholars, to draft the Al-Mizan component. This document is very important. Also, it needs to be discussed, it needs to be read, and to be as guidance for practicality in ethics in the Muslim world, as well for the student to understand. You can download it and just work. I think I cannot thanks for you who coming far away from here, or the students as well, who coming here with us to discuss, and happy to hear further about the discussion. And we hope we can enjoy the seminar, and after we hope this fruitful seminar for our life and our responsibility for the sustainable earth. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mahyudin Manjaya for your remarks. Next, we invite Professor Dr. Enawati Sinaga, MSAPT, Vice Rector for Research, Community Service, and Collaboration Universitas Nasional, to deliver her opening speech. Professor Enawati, the floor is yours. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very happy morning, especially for me, because we can gather here to talk about an issue that is more than important for us, for our future, for our today and future. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, esteemed speakers, my respected colleagues and all participants, all the students. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, on behalf of Universitas Nasional, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and highest appreciation to all of you, especially to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Paul Martins, Associate Dean of Strategic Initiative and Spatial Program from Baylor University. Thank you very much for coming to our university. Dato Professor Dr. Azizan Bahrudin from University Malaya, who will join us by Zoom probably. Professor Iim Kalimatus Sadia from Pusat Penelitian Islam dan Masyarakat Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah. Terima kasih Bu sudah hadir di dalam UNAS, berbagi pengetahuan kepada kami semuanya, terutama kepada para mahasiswa yang sangat perlu untuk kita sampaikan isu-isu terakhir tentang climate change dan ethics ini. Dan saya juga ingin berterima kasih kepada Dr. Michael Hillman dari Universitas Gadjah Mada, International Visiting Lecturer, Indonesian Consortium for Religious Studies, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Terima kasih Pak sudah hadir di tempat ini, walaupun kelihatannya beliau memang muda, tetapi saya kira bahasa Jawanya juga sudah mulai anak kita ya, dikalahkan oleh Pak Michael. Kalau bahasa Indonesianya sudah sangat fasih, karena beliau katanya sudah 10 tahun ya Pak Michael ya di Indonesia. Terima kasih banyak Pak. Dan juga kepada tentu saja kepada kolega saya, kawan saya yang sangat saya hormati, Dr. Diki Sofyan dari Universitas Gadjah Mada, yang saya kagumi karena konsistensi beliau di dalam hal mengawal tentang ethics dan climate change ini. Dan juga kolega saya, adinda saya, Dr. Fakhrudin Jaya, yang merupakan Dekan, the Dean of the Faculty of Biology and Agriculture, Universitas Nasional, and also the Chairman of Center for Islamic Studies in Universitas Nasional. Terima kasih banyak Pak Fakhrudin sudah menyelenggarakan acara ini dan melibatkan kawan-kawan dosen dan intelektual, sehingga isu-isu tentang etis dan climate change ini bisa tersampaikan kepada lebih banyak pihak. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege for me to stand here this morning to engage a meaningful dialogue about the ethical issues of climate change through the lens of religious perspective. As we all know, climate change is one of the most pressing challenges facing humanity today. With rising global temperature, melting polar ice, and rising sea level, the impact of climate change is felt worldwide. Jakarta saja, mungkin kalau kita tidak hati-hati, tidak bisa menahan kenaikan suhu di bumi ini, bagaimana tadi sudah disampaikan Pak Alvin, mungkin sebentar lagi kita harus pindah karena Jakarta akan tenggelam. Hati-hati yang tinggal di Jakarta Utara ya, yang pantai. Extreme weather such as floods, prolonged drought, and increasing power have affected the life of millions of organisms, including human beings, particularly in vulnerable regions like Jakarta Utara. These issues not only impact the environment, but also pose social, economic, and humanitarian challenges. However, beyond the scientific and political discussion surrounding climate change, there lies a profound ethical imperative that call us to reflect on our responsibilities toward each other and the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, globally, the search for solutions to climate change is not solely the responsibility of governments and scientists, but calls for collaboration across sectors and disciplines, including religious communities. Religion, which has served as a moral and ethical foundation for people worldwide, plays a significant role and action toward the environment. The religious values that teach humanity responsibility as steward of the earth offer a unique perspective in the fight against the ongoing climate crisis. This seminar is stated by Pak Fakhrudin Jaya aims to explore the role and contribution on religion in addressing climate. Through this forum, it is hoped that religious leaders, scholars, and practitioners, and also the students of course, can share insight on how their respective faith offer ethical guidance to overcome the climate crisis. Furthermore, this discussion will serve as a platform to address the role of religious communities in raising awareness about the importance of environmental stewardship and in seeking sustainable solutions. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Faculty of Biology and Agriculture, Universitas Nasional, and to Center for Islamic Studies, Universitas Nasional, who have worked hard to make this event possible. Thank you very much. All your dedication and commitment are deeply appreciated. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to all of you, to our valuable speakers and guests, and to all participants, my colleagues and the students of Universitas Nasional who attend this seminar. I wish you all a productive and inspiring seminar. Thank you very much. May God bless you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Di sini, nanti saya di Zoom-nya. Gitu. Cuman saya belum ada internet kan. Kalau belum ada kabelnya.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Pakai
next,
wifi?
we will witness the signing of the implementation agreement between
nggak
the
ada wifi-nya.
Faculty of Biology and Culture of Universitas Nasional and Baylor University. We invite representatives from both institutions to proceed with this agenda.
Harus pakai lat.
Terus pakai lah. Makanya lana lupa.
Iya, cabut aja.
Anu mau. Coba, mungkin tuh. Udah dari udah. Aduh. Oh, soalnya lu.
Bisa, bisa.
Tunda.
Kita cek dulu. Gimana? Sudah jadi.
Mana?
Kalau enggak,
Yang mana?
Yang mana?
Eko.
Environmental religious ethics. Ada nggak? Kalau nggak ada,
Compensation. Compensation. Ini. Terakhir tadi.
Signing of the implementation agreement between Faculty of Biology and Agriculture, Universitas Nasional and Baylor University has been successfully completed. Made in collaboration with
Zoom-nya apa? Zoom-nya apa? Kirimin link aja.
Now we proceed to the main session of the seminar, the speech from our speakers. Before we begin the panel discussion, allow me to introduce our esteemed moderator for the session, Bapak Dwi Sofian PhD, Vice President of Globalics ICRS, Universitas Indonesia.
Udah dikasih dari
Dr. Sofian is a distinguished physician scholar, intellectual activist, and entrepreneur whose work spans across religion and politics, social justice, sustainability, and spirituality.
Ada yang
He
ini.
has collaborated extensively with both national and international institutions, including the Indonesian government, UNESCO, UNDP, and global systems, as well as universities and NGOs worldwide. His publications have appeared in esteemed journals and publishing houses such as Springer Nature, Journal of Religions, and Globalics, and his insights have been featured in leading global media outlets like Forbes, The Economist, and Voice of America. Dr. Sofian studied project the Perang Gerak Eco Village in Gunung Kidul is
Ini
a
nyambut ini,
testament
gua nggak bisa apa-apain
to
nih.
his commitment to sustainable development, earning international recognition as the best international relations by the United States.
Gayanya itu mungkin pendek banget.
ini cuma doang.
With such an
Sini.
great background, we are honored to have been moderating today's discussion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sofian.
Iya, kamera kan itu ke sini. Oh kan nggak nyampe.
Pakaian kita coba masuk.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Gue belum masuk ke sini.
Peace and blessings be you all. Thank you for coming, all the students and faculty members. I'm truly delighted to be here, to be the moderator of this great event. Of course, I would like to thank Dr. Amawati for your
Coba linknya tadi saya
gracious,
kirim ini.
and also Professor Dr. Fahruddin Mawujaya. For those of you who don't know here, we have a legendary leader in the field of Islamic
Coba
ecology.
yang itu pesantren yang bisa kita lihat nanti setelah selesai.
Related to religion, the environment, and education. Of course, I've known him for a long time.
Fix ya, Jo. Pastikan.
Pastiin.
And
Kalau orang salah
of course, he was also
Salah
one
dari
of
biologi.
the brains behind
Ada. Iya, jangan sampai
probably 2019, yeah, which essentially was made out the plan for the linkage between water or village in down
langsung
and
video.
sustainable development. And of course, this is one of the major strides in the field of faith and environment. He was also involved in the Nizam, also spending time
sebelum
on the
penutupan.
also behind the regulation on the
yang
outside.
yang tidak dari tadi.
And of course, we
Ada
have
nggak barangnya?
alongside many of the leading figures of Islamic
Iya,
ecology and
nanti yang nama-nama.
environment.
Kan
And
lagi
of course,
udah
we have
mulai
worked
seminar
together
sebelum
as well for the past 3 years on the
Setelah
ecosystem.
Iya, setelah semua paparan selesai.
Essentially to infuse science in Islamic traditional boarding schools. So I have just returned from Barcelona like 2 days ago, and I attended the Faith Pavilion in the COP29 party. This is under the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework on Climate Change Convention. So this is the second time that the UNFCCC has endorsed what's called a Faith Pavilion. And so only after 20 years of the Conference of Parties on Climate Change that the UN has accepted and recognized and appreciated the role of religious leaders, communities, and faith actors in the field of the environment. So I also attended the faith and been speaker in one of the faith panels in the Faith Pavilion in Dubai. On COP28 in this week
yang
of
lain
on Monday.
yang tidak dari tadi
Faith Pavilion COP29. So there are a number of things which we can take note. One is why is this important? Yeah? Why is faith such an important aspect in one is that you need to understand that religion has been and probably will always be one of the most sustainable
Audio capture. Audio capture.
has been around for thousands of years and is likely to and flourish for
857.
years. Secondly, we
306
know that 85% of all
36.
which means that a majority of the world population are religious, are faithful. So maybe some of them feel that they are unaffiliated or affiliated or not. But we cannot assume that they do not have a and this is one of the things that has been increasing in our state. When people would say that I'm not religious, Richard. Thirdly, is that many people who are communities who are involved in environmental activism are And so this is why I think it's a good sort of turning point for the UN, for the multilateral agencies to consider and to appreciate the role of religious leaders and community. And just recently, Paul, this last week, also attended the first ever faith pavilion in the world. Now, Paul and I have been attending the World Urban Forum hosted by the UN Habitat in Abu Dhabi. And I tell you, if you look at the 2030 World Urban Agenda, you find no word referencing religion, faith, only the word culture, which sort of encapsulates everything, basically under the sun. But now we have a faith pavilion in the World Urban Forum. So the way I see it is that there is that new realization, that new
Ini
thinking
kalau mau jadi
within
diplomat
the
ya,
multilateral agencies, that they are trying to pass beyond the secular myopia. Yeah, and of course the secular myopia has impeded,
Oh, dia dari sini.
yeah, and sort of developed this
Dari sini belajar.
hindered from
Yeah.
getting on the plane because of his hospitality. So hopefully he will come some other day. And then we also have Professor Dr. Gaffan Dizan. I've also been engaged with her in some of the conversations regarding Black mysticism. She's an expert on Ibn on the use of existence, on Wahdatul Wujud, and I would imagine that her reflections would also come from her Islamic mystical background as well. So Professor Ian Adia is a fine fellow and she graduated from Iowa University and also Birmingham in the UK. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Paul Martins to give his presentation on Christianity and climate change. Thank you very much. Good morning. I don't know what you think about U.S. politics, but whatever that is, warm greetings to my colleagues at Yale University in Texas. Thank you, Vice Secretary Rawani, for a warm welcome. Thank you, Chairman Manfred.
Dia nggak pakai PPT.
Thank you very much.
Dia pakai PPT.
And thank you all for being here. I know you're trying and valuable.
Itu
I hope
gue.
that you
Dia
will.
masih testis ya? Itu.
Or maybe not.
Saya screen aja.
On behalf of Yale University,
Yeah.
I am grateful to join you and honored to join you.
Seminar in what I take to be one of the most important questions of our time: climate change in a world of diverse religious perspectives. In the next few minutes, I will attempt to illustrate the deep connection between climate change and religion using the example of Christianity. Now, since the UN Environmental Programme publicly acknowledged that, and I quote, spiritual values drive individual behaviors for more than 80% of the people of the world, this claim increasingly has become uncontested and accepted. That is to say, people recognize religion matters. So perhaps more than simply acknowledging that religion matters for how people engage climate change, I would like to demonstrate how different forms of religion lead individuals to different kinds of behaviors. Now, because I am a scholar primarily concerned with Christian theology and ethics, I will develop this argument with reference to Christianity. And while rather contested today, there is still a strong sense that Lynn White's 1967 article in Science was on the right track. And in that article, he basically argued that the current form of the environmental crisis can be seen to be rooted in Christianity, in a very particular understanding of Christianity. And that is the domination of nature. Of course, and very interestingly, the alternative he suggested was also a form of Christianity, but we won't get into that at the moment. The key here is that whether we love it or not, Christianity seems to be embedded deeply in this problematic trajectory. So leaving White's argument to the side for a moment, I would like to talk a little bit more about the how different forms of religion lead individuals to different kinds of behaviors. And allow me to demonstrate in 3 steps. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 2 different forms of Christianity. Then I'm going to outline the ethical entailments of these different forms of Christianity. And then I want to summarize the unique ramifications for interreligious ethics on climate change relative to these 2 different trajectories. So, part A, 2 forms of Christianity. And this is a thought experiment. This is possible answers one could give to the question, what is the defining feature of Christianity? When anyone asks that question, there's no doubt a variety of answers. And I want to look at 2 potential options. And these are on a continuum, and the issue isn't whether they're mutually exclusive. The issue is essentially, where is the priority? So, option 1, response A to the question, what's defining about Christianity? Option A is being born again or being saved. Option 2 will be loving your neighbor. And so let me say a little bit about each of these options. So option 1, being saved or born again. There is a large group of Christians in the world today that might suggest that getting saved is the critical and/or defining feature of Christianity. And in this context, saved or born again refers to an existence that transcends the earth, the bounds of temporality. We're talking about life and death distinctions here, about eternal salvation, about heaven. And while admitting things are always complicated, this version presumes that being saved is the fundamental identity marker for those within Christianity. Now, Christian scriptures are called upon to this end, and I'm just going to give you 3 examples that one could use to make the case that this is what Christianity means fundamentally. Let's look at Romans 10, verses 9 to 10, and I'll just read it. It says, "If you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved." Again, strong emphasis on being saved. Another, Mark 16:16. "Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned." And finally, John 3:16, and this is familiar to many of you perhaps. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." These are but a few of the examples of scriptural texts that ground this particular form of Christianity. It is a form that elevates the actions of God, devalues the actions of humans, and frames the world in a rather sharp binary: evil versus good, perishing versus the eternal, human action versus divine action. Now, while echoes of this are present from the beginning of Christianity, contemporary forms of it generally appear among traditional or conservative Protestant and evangelical groups. So now let me turn briefly to response number 2, option number 2. There is another strand of Christianity that is fundamentally oriented around love for neighbor as its key identifier. Again, it is not that these Christians have a different Bible, but they have a different interpretive lens that prioritizes a way of living over assent to a belief or a declaration or profession of identity. Examples of the scriptural texts that frame this form include John 13:34, and here I'll just quote it again. "A new commandment I give you," and this is Jesus speaking, "love one another as I loved you, so you may love one another. By this everyone will know you are my disciples, if you love one another." Or Galatians 5:14, "The whole law is fulfilled in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Or James 2 verse 8, "If you really fulfill the law according to Scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is doing well." Again, these are but a few examples of the kind of scriptural texts that ground this different form of Christianity. It is a form that elevates human action and disposition, relativizes other identity markers, and frames the world as a different kind of binary. And in this binary, there are those that love their neighbors, and then those that look after themselves. Again, echoes of this form go back to early Christianity, yet contemporary forms of this are often referred to as liberal Protestantism or liberal Catholics. Now, of course, in this context, my point in delineating these 2 forms of Christianity is not to determine which is better or worse, or which is the true Christianity or which is not. Rather, my first point is to illuminate that religions are internally complex, and this extends beyond Christianity to virtually all religions. So if I asked, what does it mean to be Islam? Or what does it mean to be a Muslim? People around the world sometimes give different answers about these, and it's a recognition that's complicated. Any conversation about climate change and religious perspectives must necessarily understand that appeals to religion can be just as dangerous as they may be helpful. And allow me to illustrate by sketching out the ethical entailments of the 2 forms of Christianity that I've briefly outlined here. So, the ethical entailments of these 2 forms. For example A, the being saved version, there are few obvious ethical entailments. Because of the high emphasis on God's action and the relative denigration of human goodness, all ethics are effectively secondary, even if they are defined as responsive to God's action. Therefore, there may be no ethics here, or there can be profound ethical diversity among these folks. Some of these Christians can virtually withdraw from the world, since their primary responsibility is worship of God and purity of heart. They don't have to care about the environment at all. Others can celebrate the good things in life, the good things in this world, as blessings from God, frequently believing the earth itself is one of those blessings to be used and enjoyed. Others assume that God rules their souls and the government rules their temporal existence. So mere obedience to the laws of the land one lives in, is one ethical responsibility. In virtually all of these cases, however, gratitude is the fundamental ethical disposition, and the forgiveness of ethical violations is assumed, since this basic orientation is toward eternity, not the things of this world. So, in terms of climate change, this form of Christianity can go any number of directions. While there are some who might take stewardship of the earth as a good biblical response to God's gift, others argue that caring about climate change as a Christian might actually be a distraction or a disordering of what is most important. And I can think for the example of John MacArthur, a prominent American pastor and seminary chancellor, whose response to climate change can be summed up with his own quip, and he says, "The earth is a disposable planet, inevitably destined for destruction." That's a possibility in option number 1. So for example B, loving the neighbor, there is also variation of ethical entailment, but necessarily all of these are oriented towards the good of the other person. So for example, if climate change is seen as harm to the neighbor, then ethics will necessarily seek to mitigate the effects of climate change. Now, of course, this conclusion will also be supported by other Christian convictions. For example, the earth is God's creation and it is good, drawing from Genesis, and other interpretations of the world around us. But if one understands that loving the neighbor means convincing them that they need eternal salvation, then an ethics of climate change might also be entirely irrelevant to this form of Christianity as well. And you can think here of Soren Kierkegaard, a 19th century philosopher. His definition of neighbor love is disinterested love that brings the neighbor closer to God. So you can see what I've tried to illustrate is that Christianity is very, very complicated, even if there are forms of Christianity that are very supportive of environmental ethics. And my further point in drawing out these variations within Christianity is at least threefold. So I want to make 3 kind of observations here. First, the obvious. Appeal to religion will not save the earth. We've brought the earth to this precipice of the 6th extinction and irreversible global warming by living according to our religions. We've been religious this whole time, and we're now here. So simply more of the same will probably not help us in this respect. That is the difficult, if not depressing, upshot of my comments. But point number 2, and this is a however, so this is maybe some better news. What I have also indicated is that there are forms of Christianity, and by inference, other forms of other religions, that manage to weave together a deep respect for the earth from threads internal to Christian scriptures and theology, which are then further supplemented by additional threads from the scientific community and everyday experience. In this form, religion is still the foundational orientation for ethical conviction, but it is informed and reciprocally formed by engagement with the world and culture around us. One might think, and here to go back to Laudato Si, of the integral ecology expressed in this papal encyclical. Care for Our Common Home is the translation of the title. And so you can see how Care for a Common Home reflects a very particular kind of reading of what Christianity should be. And it's an excellent example of this form of Christianity. And if climate change is to be constructively addressed, this form of Christianity must become the majority within the tradition. Finally, and my last, and actually I should say this, as we look forward to get to the particularities of climate change, not only care for the environment in terms of loving one's neighbor, looking after their homes, etc., we're going to have to start thinking about suffering, because I don't think, all indications are we're not going to make this target, and then we'll have to think about what do our religions say about the suffering that will come after these lines are crossed. And so finally, I want to take the logic of these forms of Christianity one step further by demonstrating that the place or role of interreligious ethics is also determined internal to the form of religion that one holds. So let me just elaborate on this final point a little bit further. So part C, the fragile status of interreligious ethics. Paul Knitter, and some of you may know the work of Paul Knitter, he's one of the most prominent advocates and practitioners of interreligious dialogue. He has frequently argued that interreligious dialogue is deeply dependent on intra-religious dialogue. What that means is that we are always in dialogue internally within our traditions before and even during our engagement with other religious traditions. This recognition refuses religion as an ideal, but forces us to wrestle with the realities of our lived communities. This means that I, as a Christian, cannot deny that there are other Christians, like John MacArthur in the US and around the world, that would like to see the world burn. And I suspect there might be some Muslim parallels in the many oil-rich, predominantly Islamic countries around the world. Once we recognize this reality, however, it means that our ethics cannot be simple or unilateral. To that point, allow me to dwell on just 3 observations. 1, intra-religious ethics require language and concepts internal to our own religious traditions. Climate change is not a term that appears in Christian scriptures, and I suspect the same would be said in most scriptures. Therefore, the concerns raised by climate change must find a more natural and organic religious home if they are to have any meaning, or if they are meant to generate religious conviction. This is why environmental ethics can take multiple forms within Christianity, whether that is the language of stewardship or the language of loving the neighbor. And on this, the fastest way to offend people of religion or people of faith is to treat them as a means to an end, which is to say that religions are not to be used for purposes external to religion, whether that is environmental, cultural, or political ends. This is the secular temptation, and this is, I sometimes worry, this is what the UN is trying to do. The UN has its goals, and it'll use religion to accomplish its own goals, whatever the religious tradition thinks about itself. And this is, so I refer to this as the secular temptation, and refusing this approach is a fundamental matter of human dignity. And this is a concept that echoes deeply across our own traditions. So, assuming the above, openness to interreligious ethics will again emerge organically within our own religious traditions. For those that believe all non-Christians are going to hell and therefore must be saved, there is very little room for interreligious ethics, except perhaps as a means to conversion. For those that believe all human beings are to be loved, accorded dignity, and created in the image of God, then interreligious ethics naturally grows out of the religious convictions that we are called to contribute to God's work in the world. Whether it is occurring in the world, and there are good scriptural examples to demonstrate that God is working in the world through all people and in all places and at all times, that even those that fall without or external to our religious traditions. So interreligious ethics, especially among those of us within the Abrahamic traditions, may not require a translation of our terms beyond their natural organic home in our religions, which is to say, we share a lot of language in common. The significant shared narratives between our religions means that frequently we intuitively understand what love, charity, dignity mean in our religious context. Certainly, we may not think they're identical, but we understand what we mean, and the family resemblance is similar. To my mind, this is why we often find that we share ethical convictions with very similar to those in other religious traditions, sometimes more easily than we share them with people internal to our own religions, which is to say that sometimes I think my ethics and Dickie's ethics are much more similar than my ethics and some other Christians that I'm friends with. And why is this? For example, there are times when, and exactly right, and John MacArthur and I would not recognize our own ethical convictions, even though we both claim to be Christian. This is not because our primary language is climate change, but because our primary categories and language are rooted in our religious traditions themselves. In this sense, we are allies even before we are allied against environmental degradation. So to engage the broader world, which frequently adopts secular or non-religious language and categories, we must recognize that we are speaking in translation, approximating our religious convictions within categories and terminology supplied by other traditions. This does not mean we're being unfaithful or losing our religion when we use the language of the secular world. So when we use the language of climate change, that doesn't mean we're being unfaithful. It means we're translating and we're adopting language that's not innate to our religious traditions. We are seeking to be faithful where we live and in the tradition that is embodied and in cultured reality. As mentioned earlier, climate change is one of those very pregnant scientific categories with loads of incredible assumptions built into it, and it dominates much of our world today. And it's a category, it engages categories about which many of our religions care very deeply. As people of faith, we must be self-conscious about our engagement so that we don't simply give up our faith by accident in the process. And one way to test this is to pretend you're a 5-year-old. So when I teach my undergrads, inevitably I ask them at some point in class why they're going to college. And they'll say, to get an education. And I'll ask them, so why are you getting an education? And they'll say, because I want to get a job. And I'll say, so why do you want to get a job? And they say, because I want to make money. And then I'll say, so why do you want to make money? And they'll say, I'm not sure, but I think I need stuff in this life. And then you ask them, so why do you need stuff in this life? And then it gets even more complicated and a lot more uncomfortable. Because the reasons we do things are often intuitive at bottom and tied to our religious convictions. And the further we ask these questions and the further we press our questions, the more we get down to the things that matter very much to us, but we're often uncomfortable to say and often haven't thought about near enough. That's where I want to push our conversation about this. So why do we care about climate change? Is it purely self-interest in the human existence? It can't be, because the world existed before humans did, and if all humans died, it would still exist. On its own terms, it might be better for the earth sometimes if humans just died out. I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying, one can make that argument. So why? Why do we care about climate change? Often that has to do with how we relate to other people and our care and concern for creation as we understand it through our religious traditions. That's where we have things to say to one another, and we can share in interreligious context that don't always make a lot of sense outside of our religious traditions. This is why Interfaith Power and Power and Light work. This is why Interfaith Oceans works. This is why the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development works. And this is why the work that many of you have been working on, Pasantrans, eco-Pasantrans or eco-friendly Pasantrans, that's why this works. And that's why the Faith Pavilion works. Not because it's going to accomplish UN goals, but because these goals are internal to these own traditions. So I want to step back for a moment and just offer a couple of concluding comments. What I've refused to provide this morning, and I hope no one was expecting it, but what I've refused to provide is a ringing endorsement of religion to solve these problems, whether it's Christianity or any other religious tradition. That simply alone is not going to solve this problem. Rather, I have attempted to illustrate why that claim is very difficult to prove given that our religions have led us to this point in history. Again, that is the bad news. So is there good news? Well, I think there is. But it is difficult and will take a lot of work. More work than it took to get here. And what I have tried to demonstrate is that people of faith are engaged in two dialogues at the same time. First, intra-religious debates and dialogues, and then secondly, interreligious debates and dialogues. Speaking intra-religiously, Christianity is deeply divided about the importance of climate change. Some voice their resistance, but the real problem is the many more that simply live out that resistance in their everyday pursuit of the benefits of colonialism and extractive capitalism. Nobody wants to say out loud that that's what we love, but we love the fruits of those things. This is a challenge that we are wrestling with daily on many levels. And from what I can see, Islam is not that different in many parts of the world. This is a dialogue that must be pursued by the language, concepts, and goals within each of our traditions. Self-interest, selfishness, does not rule either of our religious traditions, whether you're Christian or Muslim. Yet, in many ways, it rules our behaviors. So speaking interreligiously, we have much to learn from each other, and we have much that we can do to support one another. I don't think it is helpful for me to imagine that Christians ought to tell Muslims how to live ethically. But I do think that we in Christianity have made enough mistakes, and maybe we have on occasion got a few things right, that we may be able to help Muslims see similar tendencies within their own tradition in a way that may help all of us move forward together. And this would apply in the other direction as well. And because we are necessarily tied together by the causes and effects of climate change, we really have no choice but to pool our resources as much as we can to engage the challenges we face. At Baylor, this is the direction we are moving. We have a strong environmental sciences department, strong biology department, we have a young environmental humanities program, and our public health and social work departments are deeply concerned with the population effects of climate change. I am here today because, being fully aware of the colonial past of many Christian countries and institutions, we know that we do not have all the answers and that we need to learn from one another and work together in institutions and among individuals of other faiths if we are to be faithful to our own convictions. To that end, I am grateful for the invitation to be here, and I hope and expect that it is the beginning of a long and fruitful journey together. Thank you very much.
Right, so from secular myopia to secular temptations, Paul. Of course, we do share the idea and notion of the stewardship of the earth. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. That verily I will make the steward of the earth. But of course, what does being a steward of the earth mean? And of course, this has a lot of definitions and problems of its own. You know, some people would say that this is increasing the problem of anthropocentrism, that man is essentially the center of creation, and therefore all creation was made for the humankind. And of course, some of these theological discussions and debates need to be further elaborated, perhaps later on in the discussion. Thirdly, of course, climate change is not something which is given. I mean, the president-elect of the United States feels that the climate is changing, but there is no such thing as climate change. Right? So these are two different categories which have two different consequences and implications in terms of policies. Because if you look at the geological time, the thousands of years of the planet's existence, you find that we are currently moving up the ladder in terms of the climate of the planet. But yet, is that climate change? Or is the climate simply changing because of the geological time? because of the time in which we are in today. So thank you very much, Professor Paul Martins, for that. Now, our next speaker is Professor Emeritus Dato Azizan binti Baharudin. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Biology from the University of Tasmania, Australia, and a Master's of Science from the University College London, and then a PhD in Philosophy of Science, Science and Islam from University of Lancaster in United Kingdom. She specializes in several areas, such as the environmental ethics, religion and sustainable development, Islam and science, bioethics, interfaith, intercivilizational dialogue. She has published more than 200 books, book chapters, monographs, journal articles, and newspaper articles. One of her foremost books include Islam and Ecology, Environmental Ethics in Islam, and Harmony Between Religion and Science. So Professor Azizan will be joining us via Zoom, hopefully. So if you can just start the Zoom. Professor Dr. Azizan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diki Sofian. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Rabbi shrahli sadri wa yassir li amri. Wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. To my non-Muslim friends, that was just a small prayer so that we might understand each other better during my presentation. Honorable Vice Rector, Professor Dr. Irnawati Sinaga, Honorable Dr. Fakhruddin Mangunjaya, Chairman, Center for Islamic Studies, Dean of Faculty of Biology and Agriculture, UNAS, respected fellow speakers, participants, good morning, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be with you. Thank you so much to Dr. Paul Martins for sharing with us views on the topic of discussion for today. I will be assisted by my colleague Natasha, who will move on to the next slide now. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Thank you so much. Is it okay now? Is the reception okay?
Professor Azizan, I'm sorry, but we are having some technical difficulties here. Can you just wait for a while we test the equipment here so that we can listen to your presentation? Just 1 minute.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you test your microphone, please?
Yes. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Test? Can you test?
I can hear you very, very clearly. Is it okay?
We're not hearing you.
I am to maximum volume already. Good morning.
Test.
Fakhruddin? Yeah.
Sebentar
Yeah.
technical.
Yeah, no problem. I shall wait. No problem. Okay, no problem. But I can hear you very clearly. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Ya, mohon bisa dibantu bicara lagi, Bu.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Nggak ada suaranya.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Amin. Alhamdulillah. Is it okay now? Can I proceed? Yep, okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Diki Sofian. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. To everyone present, it's just a
Tadi
time
bagus.
giving me
Tadi bagus.
prayer
Video tadi bagus
that
suaranya.
we might
Saya
understand
kira dari sana ini.
through the presentation.
Tadi kita setel radio
Our
bagus di sana.
seminar.
Tadi.
Honorable Vice Rector, Professor Dr. Endawati Sinaga, Honorable Dr. Fakaruddin Mangujaya, Chairman Center for Islamic Studies, and also Dean of Faculty of Biology and Agriculture, UNAS. Respected fellow speakers, participants, good morning. Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very glad and happy
Bisa dibantu lagi
from my
bicara,
side
Bu?
for being invited to this seminar. So thank you so much to Dr. Paul Martens for sharing with us his views. So Dr. Paul Martens, if what I will be sharing is somewhat child's play or slightly different in terms of spirit to what has been shared, I do beg your pardon, and I think we are here to just learn from each other. And certainly I learned so much from your presentation. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so we will try very much or very hard in the time given to define slightly what is Al-Mizan, because the topic given to me is regarding Al-Mizan and its relationship to Islamic view on environmental ethics and climate change. So what is the scope of Al-Mizan? So believe it or not, it touches upon the Anthropocene, the current realities, the role of religion in Islam and also in other religions. And then the fact that what is presented in the Al-Mizan is actually among some groups already agreed upon by other religious traditions or members or some members of other religious traditions as well. And I think with my background in science, the harmonization of science or knowledge regarding climate change and spiritual values and our worldly endeavors in the fields of economics and others have a great deal to in helping us to restore balance, because the word mizan basically means balance. And when we talk about balance, we mean it in the physical aspect and also in the spiritual sense. And bottom line, philosophically speaking, we need a change in our worldview. And then, of course, what are words without deeds? So we'll be talking a little bit about our calls for action. Next. So meaning of the term mizan is balance. So you can see in the slide the balance machine, or the what do you call it? I've forgotten what you call it. The balancing of rights and wrongs, balancing of the systems in the ecosystem that are now seemingly undergoing imbalance. So what is the source of inspiration of Mizan? It is from the whole of Islamic theological foundations, of course, but in particular, it comes from one surah in the Quran, which is Surah Ar-Rahman, wherein the word Mizan is particularly spelled out. And in that surah, about 33 times, the ayat that says, and which of God's ni'mat or gift to you have you sort of forsaken or have you denied? So it is a very strong reminder of how we have not used or utilized what God has given us in the right way. And then if you want to understand, you also need to delve a little bit into the background and development of the document. It took 4 years in the making, and it went through several processes, but most critical in the Islamic tradition, it has to go through the censorship, if you like, by the Council of Elders, the most senior Islamic theologians in the world. The aims and objectives of the document, seriously, simply put, is to relearn what it is in the Islamic tradition that actually can inform us about our behavior and thinking vis-a-vis the environment today, and how we can move forward in at least mitigating. I agree with Dr. Paul. Lots of people are quite gloomy, quite pessimistic about whether we can overcome the issues or not. But that rests entirely upon the moral stance of the religious adherents. So we are not here to judge. We are not here to point fingers. We are here as co-religionists who are interested in seeing how our faith traditions can bring us together to move forward, to find solutions. So whether or not we actually succeed in the end, that's not up to us to say. Being spiritually, I hope, enlightened people, we leave that in the future to in the hands of Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. But for here and now, what do we do? What actually are we saying and what are we doing? This is the most critical point for me personally, and I think in the groups that I work with, this is also the view. So environmental ethics basically is the discipline in philosophy. You want to speak to secular people who don't believe in a religion. So we are saying that there is a kind of ethics vis-a-vis the environment, which talks about the moral relationship of human beings, not only to each other, but also to the environment, that the environment has value and moral status. And this includes all of its non-human contents. So this is part of the so-called Tawhidic worldview of Muslims, which I hope we can touch further later on. And then just very quickly putting this in, there is a resonance with the current development philosophy in Malaysia. What Al-Mizan is saying is actually, you can find resonance and agreements with the way the country thinks it will try to develop in the next coming years. Next. So I was asked by Dr. Fakruddin, thank you so much, Pak, for inviting me, to put Al-Mizan or talk about Al-Mizan in the context of, in a bigger context, in the interreligious context. So I always bring everybody back to the Earth Charter. And I know Dr. Paul just said that some people, the UN, maybe perhaps use religions to their ends. So I'm not too sure about that. For me, whatever is put on our plate, it is our duty from our own perspective, from our own backgrounds, to study it and see whether it jives with what we're trying to do, with what we're thinking and feeling. So for me, you talk about 194 or more countries of the world. We do not know what is their stance, even though 80% of the world's population says that they have religion. But climate science, environmental science is showing to us that we actually stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when our future needs to be looked at. And the spirit of human solidarity and kinship with all life should be strengthened, if we live with reverence for the mystery of being. So this word mystery is not a totally materialistic and secular word. It has to be unpacked, it has to be demystified. But I think for religious people, the mystery of being is opening the door to our bringing in our spiritual values. So we need to have gratitude for the gift of life. We've said this before. And also we need to be humble regarding the human nature. So we urgently need a shared vision of basic values to provide an ethical foundation for the emerging world community. And for me, after studying the Al-Mizan, after being involved with it in a very humble way, together with all the other bigger thinkers in the field. So Al-Mizan for me is a kind of Muslim response to the Earth Charter. And the Earth Charter, by the way, was promulgated in the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken. Next. Yeah, and also I take notes of what was spoken about at the Stockholm meeting in 1972, and also Stockholm Plus 50 in June 2022. if you look at the two interfaith statements, you can see that there is a kind of agreement amongst people of faith that we need to actually commit ourselves to caring for ecological justice and for protecting our one earth, and statements were made to this end, as typical of any declaration. So by saying and sharing all these things, I hope that those of us in the audience who don't particularly belong to any faith groups can join the ranks of the so-called religious adherents in this pursuit of restoring the balance of the earth. Next. Also, Dr. Paul mentioned this recognition, even though it's quite recent. These two excerpts that I put on the screen here, it was produced in the year 2007, almost about 20 years ago. So the realization that religion can do good, yeah. And I take note of your what do you call it? You're reminding us that religion may be used by other people. But my own personal theology, and I hope a few of the colleagues, and there are more than a few actually, feel that that is not up to us to say. We should not be worried too much about how people abuse us. I mean, we should care about how people abuse us. But what I'm trying to say is taqwa, or the belief, the full belief that Allah, God will take care of us, that gives us strength. So anything can be misused, abused, made to produce effects that we don't intend. So that is beyond us. But in the here and now, as we said, what do we do about climate change in Malaysia, in Indonesia, just in this part of the world? I mean, in Philippines, we see the effect of climate change in front of our eyes. So we cannot stand by and not do anything. Next. So the role of religion, as you also pointed out, is to change behavior. And in Malaysia, we are also doing what is called the National Planetary Health Action Plan, which is a bold kind of initiative to make the whole of the development plan of the nation and all the sectors of development in the nation actually follow through certain guidelines vis-a-vis mitigating and trying to reduce the effect of climate change. And we may refer to psychologists and experts in human behavior, but basically this the one that I share with you on the screen sort of tells us the various stages of changes of behavior. The pre-contemplation stage, the contemplation, and then the preparation, and then the action, and then the maintenance of the action, and then we of course, being normal human beings, will relapse into our old habits again. So again, cynicism can be the order of the day, but seriously, we feel that that we can't accept that. We just have to keep moving, and we say that out of an earnest desire and belief in what we have in terms of spiritual values, and we try to implore others to see our point of view. But if they don't, that's okay. It doesn't hurt. Next. Yeah, as Alvin Toffler says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And what is it that we have to learn? We have to learn climate science, climate issues. And then what is it that we have to unlearn? We have to learn the bad habits, if you like, the behavior, the economic systems, the extreme capitalism, the disdain for looking at the poor, the concern that there is a rising gap between rich and poor. Because if you look at the world today, the gap, despite the sustainable development goals, the gap between rich and poor widens every day. So we have to unlearn our habits in overconsumption, for example. Relearn. What is it that we have to relearn? We have to relearn. This is what Al-Nizam is trying to do. What our religion says vis-a-vis what we can do to change. Whether or not we are successful or totally halfway successful, that's we can't say that now. But the critical thing is we have to do something. Next. And as we all know, in environmental ethics narrative, the experts are talking about two types of dominant worldview. The more dominant one is the man-centered, which sees man as the measure of everything. And by his reason alone, he can know and solve everything, and resources are infinite. Other species are of utilitarian value only. And this worldview is always often seen to be in synchrony with materialism. But that another worldview, and we can say that the people who love the environment, who fight to maintain the environment, are saying that man is not the measure of everything, and reason need to be aided by revelation or values, and resources are finite and limits do exist, and the material dimension is should be balanced with the spiritual dimension. And all this brings us to the view that there should be ethics that govern our behavior, and worldview is the basis of the ethics, and worldview generally is collection of our knowledge, attitudes, values, beliefs about the world around us, and which inform our thoughts and actions. Next. So as a Muslim, we worked on this project for the past 30 years, 30 years over. So we try to see the latest narrative about saving the world. So whether or not you think that this is useful, but for us, your honest, your intellectual honesty, your spiritual honesty in looking at this, it's something to be supported. I think something to be celebrated. So if it doesn't work for some people, that's okay. But for a lot of people, it seems to make sense. So basically, for Muslims, we have three types of relationship between man and man and his creator, and man and the environment. And these three should be in harmony with one another, and they coexist with one another. And you may have heard of the word Sharia, which is the religious law, as stated in the Quran. So the aim of those laws, God's ways, God's guidance to how men should live, is to protect faith, life, intellect, lineage, and wealth. And each of these five protections, you can elaborate them further. And if you look at it objectively, they are not out of that SDG goals at all. So the idea of climate intelligence, I put it like that because in religious studies curricula, I suspect much more needs to be inputted in terms of making the layperson, to understand what is going on. Just the fact that he is choosing plastic bottles over non-plastic containers, for example, makes a lot of difference. It is as Surah Al-Zalzala says in the Quran, every little deed that you do, whether it's good or bad, is written and will be rewarded or otherwise by the Creator. So when you actually do your religion, you actually must understand that it is not just in terms of theory, ideas and beliefs. The action part is most critical, and all this will input back to the whole idea of sustainable development. Next. So we all know also of the sustainability imperative. I do not know if politicians insist that or theologians or you can do not believe it is imperative. That's okay. As I said, this is what dialogue is all about. Dialogue is for us to understand each other. Like if I hold my hand like this, I ask you, how does my hand look like? My palm, you will describe to me what you see. But you do not see what I see, which is this, right? So it's up to it's up to us to actually go into the realm of understanding of the other to understand each other. So the whole idea is not to make all religions the same. The whole idea is to understand where are the commonalities. And so we work on those commonalities for the common good. So in amongst professionals, not just among theology or theological teachers, even among professional scientists themselves, the whole idea of climate change is not supported. And the whole idea of sustainability also is not well understood, but that's okay. But what is critical is, and I'm so sorry again that you actually explicitly mentioned the fact that United Nations might be making use of all of us. So I hope that's not the case, because I think, like everywhere, there are divisions. Why is it that the Secretary General, Dr. Antonio Guterres, for COP28, I remember he said we are all marching into climate hell. So which means that there are things that he wants to do, that he believes in, that the system does not entirely support. And we all know how at the United Nations there are geopolitical what do you call it, processes at work as well. But this is where being religious and being spiritual comes into the picture. How close are we to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? How close are we to our Creator? How much do we actually believe in Him? And this is iman. This is faith. This is faith. Willing to do, but with conditions. Yeah, willing to do what you think God asks you to do does not mean that you take other people's rights. You are zalim to them, or you are unjust to them. That's wrong. So this is the process of relearning for Muslims. They've taken their rituals and all that for granted, just like that. But right now there is a certain condition, a certain situation where they need to apply their religion in a more clear manner. And Al-Mizan emphasizes this. It's about 90 something pages, isn't it, Pak Tarudin? And the urge is for us to look what it's saying, and it tries to harmonize the science, the knowledge of climate change, and the content of Islamic life. And when this is harmonized, and to see what else that we should go forth with. Next. Okay, so again, to the secular people, I take care to speak to so-called non-religious people, because many times, like you said, people view at religion and religious people in a certain way, and they think that we are not helping much. We sometimes add more damage to the situation. So if you look at just conventional analysis, conventional work in the area. So now this is coming from Center for Equal Literacy in the United States. So they feel that right now we need to garner together all the elements of the human being: the brain, the heart, the hands, the spirit. For the spirit, they call it connectional. This is where we actually engage with nature, understand what nature is. And to Muslims, the things in nature are signs from the Creator. So through His creation, we connect with Him. And so this is where science is important. In Malaysia now, there's a big emphasis, I'm here in Indonesia as well, on the fact that people must relearn about the importance of nature, what is inside nature, how does it work, and how do we actually protect nature. So I will not, because of the interest of time, will not go through all the boxes. But I think we can understand here that this, for the Islamic system, this is how it should be. We do not just admit on the tongue that we believe in Allah and the Prophet and the Quran and the Revelation, but we should actually feel it in our heart, and then this is translated into our actions and deeds. And of course, this is supported by a very strong spiritual intelligence. Next. Spiritual intelligence is not normally talked about, but it is part, we know, in religion, that is important to the human being. So, like I said earlier, Al-Mizan is also a reflection of dialogue between religion, Maqasid Syariah for the Muslims, and Sustainable Development Goals. And we even, at the international level, some of our scholars make the suggestion that there should be an 18th goal. And what is that 18th goal? Ethics. Ethics and this deep notion of compassion and feeling mercy to all the creatures of the planet. And let's say when we do our saum, when we do our fasting in the Ramadan, what is the purpose of that? Is for us to actually feel in our hearts and in our being what it is like to be hungry, what it is like not to have enough food on your table and all that. So our religion, forgive me if I'm wrong here, our religion teaches us to value life, to link life, the total of life, with revelation in as full manner as possible. Next. So please tell me if I have run out of time. Sorry, next. Yeah, so for some Muslims, they take this ayat in the Quran that talks about stewardship. Yeah, we talked about stewardship just now. So like I said, depends on our relearning, depends on our re-understanding, but we must remind ourselves that we must do everything with love and compassion towards others. So in Al-Baqarah ayat 143, God says, we have made you into a middle nation, so that you may be a witness over mankind, and the messenger may be a witness over you. And witness is in the Arabic word is shahid. It is our duty to communicate God's message to everyone in every generation, in every age. So this is if you look at the revelational narrative. But if you convert it to the Al-Mizan narrative, Mizan will explain to you that how you could be doing this. And again, I'm sorry to have to touch these points. It needs to be said whether it is accepted or not, agreed upon or not. That's okay. We can dialogue about that. We all know that the Quran recognizes all the prophets from Adam until the last one, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is more words in the Quran regarding Isa al-Masih, Jesus, more than the other prophets, for example. So I think that's what the clash of civilization once made popular by Samuel P. Huntington in the United States. I think it's more of a clash of ignorance rather than a clash of familiarity, a clash of real content of meaning. So for Muslims, I would say, how can you be witness unto others if you yourself don't have enough knowledge, if you yourself don't have enough values and adab and iman and taqwa to do this vis-a-vis climate change? And Al-Mizan, I would like to humbly submit to you on behalf of my friends who actually are involved with the Al-Mizan documents. Please have a look, and I'm sure you can access these documents. You can contact me if you want to have an access to document yourself. And so we need to do this, and we have no other choice. Otherwise, we'll just let the whatever is happening be, and I think psychologically that's not sustainable either. Next. Yeah, so we can also read in the Al-Mizan and the development of it, how it was in 2019. The idea was mooted at Islamic Conference of Environment Ministers. So due to the collaboration of IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, ISESCO, which is the Islamic World Educational, Science and Cultural Organization, IFES, or Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Science in the UK, the Qatar Quranic Botanic Gardens, and colleagues from Hamad bin Khalifa University, and also university in Turkey and others. It was put together. It took 4 years. Yes, ST, you can have the thing. Thank you so much. And so, as we said earlier, Al-Mizan, the title of document, Covenant for the Earth. So for Muslims, there was another declaration, Islamic Declaration for Climate Change, which was produced in 2015, launched in Istanbul, Turkey, also forwarded to the world community through the United Nations. But Mizan is the latest one. It's much more elaborated, and I would like to humbly say that not because I've been part of the project, but I think it is much more delved into the whole issue. And the problem with, the situation with Muslims is that, like in Christianity and other religions too, I suppose, there are many groups. And it's true, Dr. Martins, that the intra-dialogue is most critical. So, but if there is mutual respect And if there are laws, religious as well as civil laws in place, and we all follow this, I think that there shouldn't be any, serious conflicts that lead to destruction. Next. Yeah, so the drafting team, you may have a look also later on. Next. So what is the table of contents? So again, I would beseech, I would persuade you to have a look. Yeah, what's inside it. Don't give up, because this is the Al-Mizan is the products of the work of Muslim scientists, Muslim philosophers, Muslim theologians. So if you talk about intra-faith collaboration, so this is an example of an intra-faith collaboration. So we in the section of reflections, we take note of what's going on. And we take note about the human legacy, what our hands have wrought. So this is where we speak about the Anthropocene, the anthropogenic situation where, in the past there were things that went wrong on the planet of the Earth also. So yeah, I understand what that means. But in the here and now, as I said, we are all given this situation in front of us. So the choice is ours. Yeah. So global climate change is here, even though some people don't accept it. That's all right. The loss of biological diversity is real. Yeah. So ecological and social justice is also, being hampered. And but we must, in our religion, even if tomorrow is Qiyamah, the doomsday, today you can plant a seed. We must do that. So we must remain hopeful. And then second chapter talks about the signs of God in the heavens and the earth. That there's this cosmic equilibrium, the Mizan, where Allah describes everything in the world as signs from Him. And we are all khilafah fil al-ard. So don't worry too much about stewardship. Are we really this? Are we really that? As I said, there is a part of the religion which is called the personal knowledge, fardu ain, fardu ain, zikir, remembrance. So I'm sure there are equivalents in other religious traditions, especially the Abrahamic religious traditions. So the notion of being far away from Allah is very scary to human beings, because in Islam, because once you do that, you are lost. So then is the beginning of not caring, is the beginning of things not being good. And then there's the ecological ethos and ethics of Islam, the ethics of Tawheed. Again, like I said, we can't go into everything today. But believe you me, especially the Muslims, the Muslim professionals, if you're not familiar, just have a look. Don't worry, it's not difficult at all. And then the whole notion of revering God in His creatures. This is where compassion and mercy to everything. If you really love God, then you must love His creatures. This is what this ethics is saying. So the fact that you wantonly throw toxic materials, half the ocean is full of plastic, that is not revering God. So this is the notion that we need religious people to understand. So it's not just going to the mosque, it's not just doing your five daily prayers, doing the saum, doing the zakat. That is everything that you do that will impact the planet, and this is the reality. That we need to show compassion towards those even non-sentient beings. What more to fellow human beings? And what do we see in the world today? So all this is tied to the spiritual practices, like I said. And you of course, you go to the hadith. There's a beautiful exemplar in all of these practices in the person of the Prophet. Next. So chapter 4 talks about equity, fairness, and justice in sharing the sources of life. So here again, as in the style of the Mizan, you harmonize what you need, what you need to do in conventional terms, and how you actually link that with your spiritual values. So there's prosperity in perspective. You cannot be wasting. those people who waste and look at the lifestyle of the super rich, and lots of things that are being done is based on the sifat-sifat mazmumah, showing off, pride, so these are the spiritual values, lack of gratitude. So then there is a lot of talk about, a lot of explanation about frugality and wasteful excesses. And these two has been taken up as a narrative globally, whether we speak in religious terms or not. And then true to what the purpose of Al-Mizan is, which is to show what real actions you can do. It talks about the Sharia and its aims, the benefits and detriments of all that we do in economics, in all the various spheres of our lives, about how we should be consuming our food and what is really halal, what is good or tayyib, and then we need to protect the sources of life, and then the ethics, Sharia-based policies. Yeah? So those who are non-Muslims, for example, do not be scared. So we do explain all this via empirically witnessable, can I say that, via empirically based notions, so we are not like pushing down people's throat theological dictums from the religion. So most critical, we should be securing rights and averting wrongs. So very quickly, I go back to next so the Holocene we spoke about. So Al-Mizan actually is reminder of the anthropogenic conditions of today. Yeah, things were okay until 12,000 years ago, and if we've heard of this analogy, if you look at the face of the clock, so human beings only come in the last, 1 minute, I've forgotten, but we've done so much harm. Okay, so how can we say that no, we were not the ones who did that? So it's not about pointing fingers, it's about admitting what is happening, and to see where individuals, communities, countries, nations, faith-based organizations, government-based, anybody, okay, and that idea that you need to do something, that is the most critical that religion gives to you, that feeling that you are responsible. Because in Islam, when we meet our God later in the afterlife, he will speak to you directly. You'll be shown what you do in this world directly. So this is part of Rukun Iman. This is part of the six beliefs pertaining to faith of the Muslim. And for me, if you truly have faith in that Rukun Iman, you'll be taking this seriously. And you do whatever you can. I don't understand all these big things. Okay, fine. Do the little things. Yeah. So why is it that this is important with why are pesantren in Indonesia following this? Because being people of faith and deep spiritual values, they would be able to understand this much more clearly. Next. Yeah, so development that is unsustainable, and this is one of the greatest issues today, and there is enough for everybody. Have heard of this before. There's enough for everybody's needs, but not enough for everybody's greed. Needs and greed, especially, you need to realize this. You have to understand this in religious terms. So religious people, I don't know, it depend on your own particular denomination, I guess, but I think in the Islamic world, it's safe to say, it's not wrong to say in public that you must curb your greed, because that is following your nafs, that is following your desires. And I think in many religions, desires are to be curbed and to be controlled. So today we read the narrative and how much the richest of the world are owning and how much the poorest of the world are owning. So we need to do something about this. And next slide. In Islam, we have the wakaf, we have the zakat system, which I will look at later. But education is very critical, and fardu kifayah. I think climate justice, climate change, the issue of the environment is something that those who are in the know must reach out. And I know this. Our colleagues in Indonesia are doing marvelously at this. We are not that fast in Malaysia, but we're trying to do our best as well. So we actually go to communities, scientists, and theologians. We speak to them about the value of their ecosystems, and we work with the young ones, for example. So this is a group of 7 to 12-year-olds who form actually environmental Environmental Care Society at the guidance of scientists from universities. So they end up speaking to the public, to audiences about the importance of keeping your ecosystems. So this is one of the projects, small projects that we think should be emulated. Next. So again, like as expected, there are pledges made in the Al-Mizan. We urge educators, urge our fellow Muslims, urge Muslim jurists, economists, remind leaders and decision makers, call upon the governing authorities, corporations, call upon conservation agencies, okay, to do what needs to be done. And I think we can easily find this kind of pledges everywhere. I'm not saying that the Al-Mizan is not unique. It's unique because, as I said, the prequel to all these pledges is what has been explained, and this is in the later part of the document. Next. So most critically today, I think some parties are already taking some of these pledges seriously. Prince Hassan Al Talal of Jordan, for example, has created a special project in his own country, and there are many others, and Indonesia, especially with a huge Muslim population, they have made great strides to empower Muslim youths to become the future leaders of Al-Mizan, and entrust them to take it forward to the next level. So next. But there are challenges that we must be wary of. The two things that threaten to militate against our successes, and one is that we fail to do what we need to do, of course, and we fail to embody these teachings in our lives, and we will again allow greed, laziness, or pettiness to divert us from the nobility of our teachings. The other is the dominant economic paradigm of unending growth and consumption, and only a few understand the economics of globalization, and only a few run and benefit by it. But failure to confront it might ultimately seal the demise of our global village. The gravity of the looming environmental crisis threatens to eclipse all other crises in human history. Its effects make no distinction between race, religions, and culture, or the lines we draw on maps. It should remind us that we are irrevocably connected with the Lord of all in the natural world. To God belong all things in the heavens and on the earth, and God has ever encompassed all things. So I suppose to some people, talking about what Karen Armstrong said is to no avail, but she did say that the problem with all the religious traditions is this lack of strength in terms of committing themselves to what their religion is teaching them vis-a-vis climate change, vis-a-vis planetary health. So last few slides, just to share with you what we have done in Malaysia. Next, we have the water wakaf. Next. Yeah. So this is done by the Ministry of the Environment. This is where people actually donate. Wakaf is actually philanthropic charity in conventional terms, but for religious people, you get the reward in the afterlife, especially. So a lot of people are drawn to participate in this, and it has worked. Next. Trending in the bigger world of the economic players is the venture wakaf, whereby people actually provide capital to do what do you call it, manufacturing, or to do economic ventures that not only matches the circular economy principles to minimize wage, to promote justice, to actually emphasize on reutilizing materials. So it is green, call it venture, green economic ventures, whilst at the same time, it is based on mercy and compassion, in the sense that those who provide the wakaf capital does not expect to be given back the profits. It goes back into the business venture. So we have experts such as Professor Tariqullah Khan who speaks about this, and we can also note his situation. So okay, I have to stop now. Yeah, Pak Fakarudin, are you calling me? Okay, next. Okay. Okay, last. Next, Natasha. Yeah, so this is the spiritual intelligence that all religions must pay special attention to, and we should support the literacy of causes of climate change among religious adherents, and we should share and we should utilize our media platform to the maximum, and also our networking. Last but not least, yeah, we need a common language that puts together the science and the spiritual values, and we need to avoid this. And if some of us choose to give up, that's okay, but we will try not to make them give up. Next, as Zazala says, every little thing that you do is very important. So let's do, no matter how small. So wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I give you back to the MC, Dr. Diki. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Test. Thank you very much, Professor Azizan, for your elaboration on the Al-Mizan. Can I have the speakers back in front, please? And thank you very much for describing to us and elaborating on this project on Al-Mizan, or on the sort of cosmic equilibrium. And also a reminder that we should now focus or migrate from human-centered development to more of life-centered development, and also this fixation from fiqh or sharia to maqasid al-sharia, or the principal objectives of the sharia. And you talked also about doomsday, or what I would call the extreme state of unsustainability. You know, there's this beautiful hadith which says that if you're holding a sapling in your hand and you see judgment day coming, so keep on planting. So thank you very much, Professor Azizan. So I would like now to invite Professor A.M. To the stage, and I'd just like to read her CV just a little bit. As I had mentioned, that she graduated from Iowa State University in 2019. Her dissertation was on the politics of women's health, decentralization, state capacity, and maternal mortality disparities. She got her MA in sociology from Birmingham University, but also MA in interdisciplinary Islamic studies from UIN Sharif Hidayatullah. Now she is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology in the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences in Sharif Hidayatullah Islamic University, and also a visiting fellow in the Regional Social and Cultural Studies program at ICS in Yusof Ishaq Institute in Singapore. So Professor Ian, I give you the floor.
Yep, thank you so much for this opportunity, Pak Fahrudin, for inviting me for this event. So slightly different with the previous presenter that focused more on the ethics. So my presentation today will focus more on empirical data. So this is part of the bigger project that our center are doing. You know, it's called Religious Environmentalism Action. Well, we call it REACT. So we have several series of research, and the one that I'm going to present, this is only a small part of the research. So the title of my presentation is Green Islam and Climate Change in Indonesia. So next, please. So move to the background why this study initiated. It's because we see the growing number of initiative from religious group to concern on the issue of environment, or some people may call it as religious environmentalism increasing in Indonesia, and some may call this religious environmentalism as Islamic environmentalism or Muslim environmentalism, but in our term we call it as a green Islam. It's growing. And based on several studies that has been done on the issues of Islamic environmentalism, most of them focus more on certain cases, like 1 or 2 cases, but in our project we try to looking at in more broader context. And what is the missing from the study is because some of the study do not specifically, even though this movement concern on the issues of environment, so what is missing is to some extent this movement focus on the climate change. Next, please. So for my presentation today, I will address 2 questions. First is why do some green Islam movement in Indonesia focus on climate change while other address other environmental issues, and how does religion shape the environmental ethic or green Islam movement and Muslim concern. So my presentation is combination between the movement and also Muslim population in Indonesia in general. Next, please. So for my presentation, I use the framework from the social movement theory. Especially, there is a shift from a new social movement that focus only on certain regional movement into more transnational social movement. And the issues of climate change, we can consider that as a you can say it's a global, transnational issues, but then adapted to a more local and national context, like in the context of Indonesia. And from this perspective, I also will use several framing theory on how the frame alignment process happening among this movement, and also frame diffusion from international or transnational issues into more localized and national context of climate change in Indonesia. Next, please. So as I mentioned before, that this is a small part of our big project of REACT. So for this presentation, I use several data. I mixed up between qualitative and quantitative ones. So the qualitative one, we do a desk research with 192 religious environmentalism or religious environmental groups in Indonesia, and 142 of them are Islamic organization, or we call it Green Islam group. And then we also conducted 50 FGD with 50 figures, and also we conduct interviews with many of the informant from these groups, and we also conducted observation with several community of Green Islam all over Indonesia. And for the quantitative, we did a survey for national survey with 3,397 respondents, but for this presentation, I only use like 3,045 Muslims. So my presentation will focus on Muslim only this time. Okay, next, please. So in this presentation, I use the concept of what so-called as Green Islam movement as a collective effort or action using the principle of Islamic teaching to protect environment. So what people do inspire them to protect the environment driven by the Islamic ethic or Islamic values. And the Green Islam movement in my presentation will cover some example are those based on mass organization in Indonesia like LPBI-NU, Muhammadiyah, and other organizations affiliated to Islamic organizations or certain religious community, and some of them also based on non-governmental organizations. Next, please. So maybe I will start with the overview of what are the characteristic and typology of the green movement in Indonesia. Next, please. So this is the distribution of our data. So as I mentioned before, from the data that we collected, there are 192 faith-based environmental movement in Indonesia, and 142 among them are focused on are based on Islamic organization or communities. And among this group or among this movement, 88% of them local based, and 11 of them work in the national level, and only 1% have more broader scope in international scale. Next, please. And in terms of affiliations, some of them, like 68% affiliated to certain Islamic religious group in Indonesia, and like the rest, like 32%, they are more independent. And in terms of the affiliation, 70% of them affiliated to Muhammadiyah, one of the Islamic organization in Indonesia, and then 24% affiliated to Nahdlatul Ulama, and the rest affiliated to other Islamic groups. And in terms of forms, some of this green movement, they form a community, 4%, and 1% are coalition, and 21% are NGOs, and the rest, like 75%, are based on Islamic organization in Indonesia, especially Muhammadiyah and NU. Next, please. And then the typology of Green Islam in Indonesia based on what they are doing, even though some of this movement may focus on several issues, but we see the tendencies of this movement, like 77% of them focus more on as a policy campaigner, 18% on as a mobilizer, and 6% on conservationists. Next, please. And this is in terms of the membership. In terms of the membership, 68% of this Green Islam movement are common people. There is no age limitations, but then 18% of them also part of the young generations. And also some of the Green movement also focus on only a religious figure or religious leaders. It's only 1%. And some of this movement also led by women. Among of them is 12% of this green movement led by or organized by women, Islamic women in Muslim women in Indonesia. And in terms of leaderships, most of this movement, like I mentioned before, only small portion led by women, only 23%, and the rest, like 70%, led by male. And then this movement also focus on the issues of energy transitions, like only 12% of them focus on this new issue, but the rest did not really focus attention on energy. So my next question is, how about climate change? Whether do they really focus on the issues of climate change, or they only focus on other environmental issues, even though we can say that various environmental problems can lead or contribute to the issues of climate change. But we specifically focus on how this movement use the term climate change, climate crisis, or climate justice in their campaign, in their website, or in their activities. This one, next please. This one is a network between those movements. So you could see here that the biggest organization, as I mentioned, that based on Muhammadiyah, and the second one NU, and the rest is smaller. There is connection and network between this religious environmental group, but only small portion of this movement, they work alone and don't have any connection or network with other Green Islam movement. Next, please. Now let's move on to the main question of, do they focus on climate change? Next, please. This is also based on our data that among 152 Green Islam movement, only 41.13% focus on the issues of climate change. But the rest, like 58 of them, still not really focusing on the issues of climate change, but on other environmental issues like waste, like specific, even though I said waste can also contribute to climate change, or deforestation can contribute to climate change, but they do not use the term climate change in their advocacy or in their campaign. Next, based on the affiliations, you could see here that the most of Green Islam that focus on climate change in terms of the affiliation, you could see again Muhammadiyah, like 58% of among the among Green Islam movement affiliated to Muhammadiyah, 58 of them focus on the issues of climate change. While among NU Islamic Green Islam movement among NU group, only 21% of them focus on climate change. So if we compare between between Green Islam movement that focus on climate change, the proportion of Muhammadiyah is the highest, like 66%, while NU only 8.3% of them focus on the issues of climate change. And this is also the profile of whether they focus on most of the Green Islam that focus on climate change. Oh, next, please. Sorry. Yeah, most of the Green Islam movement focus on climate change. They tend to use the strategy as a policy campaigner. So rather than using the term like climate justice or climate crisis, most of this Green Islam movement focus more on the term climate change, which some scholars mentioned that this is more natural, more natural rather than more radical one like climate justice and climate crisis. Next, please. And in terms of scope, as I mentioned before, that even though the issues of climate change is a global issue, but then transform into local issue, you could see here that many Green Islam that focus on the local scope, they tend to adopt or they also embrace the term of climate change in their movements. So around 86% of them focus on the issues of climate change. Next, please. And my next question is why? Why do some Green Islam movement focus on climate change while other focus only on other environmental issues? So using the social movement net theory, I said that because there is a diffusion of frame process from the global context to the national context. And if you could see, there is a Paris Agreement in 2015, and also among the Muslim countries, there is Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change in Istanbul 2015. That was the critical juncture that changed or shift the focus of a Green Islam movement, because the initially Islamic Green Movement focused on disaster and humanitarian action. But then after the Istanbul declarations focusing on climate change, that global context diffused to, especially at that time, focus on more leading figures or Islamic figures in their country and in Indonesia, like Pak Fahrudin, I think, also part of this event. So that's part of the hierarchical division where the transnational or global politics or global context of climate change diffuse to more localized or national context like Indonesia. And that time, the transition or the shift from disaster action to climate change began. And in the local or national context, then this movement or this Green Islam movement also tried to use, to adopt the process of frame alignment in which they're bridging the issue that they initially focus on with other issues, including climate change. For example, if you talk about climate change like Kader Hijau Muhammadiyah or FNKSDA, they focus on land grabbing, inequality, but then they bridge that issue with the issues of climate change. So this is one of the strategy how they adopt the transnational issues of climate change, but align them with the local context, social and political context in Indonesia. And also, some of them also extending the scope. Some of them, for example, only focus on deforestation, but then they realize that the issues of deforestation can also contribute to the issues of climate change. So that's why they're extending the scope of the issues of the movement. So this is one of explanation of why some Green Islam transform or expanding their scope into climate change. And also, this is also, next please. in the aspect of among religious group, there is also conversation or discussion regarding the dichotomy of the concept of bi'ah among religious community and the Green Islam in Indonesia. For example, Ulil Absar Abdallah that we invited in our event previously, he mentioned that there is dichotomy, that al-bi'ah or environment in Indonesia, there are two levels, bi'ah as-sughra and then bi'ah al-kubra. Bi'ah as-sughra is something that's small. It's not problematic. Waste, something small, environmental destruction is something that's small, and it's okay for Islamic movement or Islamic Green movement to focus on this small habitat. But for al-bi'ah al-kubra, like climate change, is problematic because climate change, it's still debatable in the context of global, and he considered, for example, as a cultural war. So that's why this concept, the dichotomy, the division or separation between al-bi'ah al-sughra and al-bi'ah al-kubra can be in my perspective, can be an obstacle of why certain green movement only focus on small habitat or only focus on small issues of environment rather than expanding their scope to a more global context like climate change. Next. And this is the example of how, this is the survey that I mentioned before, so in the context of Muslim community as well, not in terms of a movement, in terms of Muslim community, most of Muslim community consider that waste is the most critical problem to the society because it's easier to see, it's around you, so that's why they think this is the most critical one. While the climate change is the second, but not the priority. And why waste is more important for public is because you could see everywhere, so it's closer to you. So it's also easier for the movement to focus on certain issue that can easily be addressed directly, rather than maybe climate change is too complex for certain people. How to understand the term climate change itself is already difficult. Next, please. And this is to address my last questions. Also, this is based on our survey on Muslim Muslim population. So, to show how religion shaped the environmental ethics on climate change, I use on the left side, I use the measurement of human and nature. It's also developed by Prof. Whitson from ICRS. But with this measurement, we correlate it with the concern of Muslim on climate change. And you could see here, the red one is for those who concern on climate change, while the blue one for those who do not concern on climate change. So based on the human and nature relationship here, human beings who have more ethic view that consider the relationship between human and nature as a participant or as a human is a steward or as a partner to the environment, they are more likely to be concerned with the climate change rather than those who do not really, they do not really consider themselves as a participant or steward or partner to the environment. And here, in terms of human as a master, or people always consider that Anthropocene perspective, anthropo perspective, there's no significant difference whether they concern or not concerned on the issues of environment. And other religious aspect that I want to highlight here, it's also maybe confirming Paul's presentation there that although some religion encourage people to do a good thing to the environment, but in reality it's very complex. Like in this case, we use the measurement of conservatism. So individuals or Muslims who have more tendency of conservatism in terms of theology and in terms of political leadership, they're expecting that somebody with the same religious background as the leader in their country, in the region, and etc., they tend to have more they tend to less concern on the environment. So this is show how the complexity of the role of religion, maybe to some extent they can encourage and promote and shaping the individual behavior to the environment and climate change, but on the other side also the perspective of religion may also hinder them to be concerned on the issues of environment and climate change. I think I don't have to conclude anything. I think I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Halimatus Saadia, sorry. And thank you very much for elaborating on the research findings. And I can see some of the gaps and discrepancies between the more sort of traditional, conservative, and modernist, progressive Muslim movements. We could also see from the data the gender discrepancy and also the sort of minor, major agenda on climate issues and also the local, national, global issues. There is one thing though, one of the things I mentioned at the Faith Pavilion was on this reflection I have on the ABC model, which is the attitudinal behavioral change model. Because it seems like if you look at the literature and the various research, you find a clear gap and discrepancy between attitudes and behavior, i.e. between intention, worldview, and behavior, action, and habits of people. So we also saw that in the Eco Pesantren project, where people do have in mind some conservation efforts, some ideas about sustainability and doing something about climate change, but then there is also limitations in terms of the actions, the behaviors, and habits. So maybe we can delve into that much more in more private conversation. So with that, I would like to open up a discussion for if you have any issues, questions, or remarks you'd like to make to any one of the presenters or two of the presenters. We have 2 microphones here, so if you'd like to just raise your hands, please, for any questions. I'll give 3 people. Okay, 1. Who else? You can pose your question in Bahasa Indonesia or English or Arabic or whatever language you want. Okay, 1. Who else? Okay, just 1 first. Mike, do you mind giving the mic to her? Please state your name and affiliation.
Test.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the chance. My name is Felicia Zahra Putri Manopo. I'm a student. I'm majoring in international relation. I would like to ask a question for Dr. Paul Martins and Professor Iim. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. In Dr. Paul's presentation, you emphasized the importance of interfaith dialogue in addressing climate change, while Professor Iim discusses how faith communities participate in the climate change crisis. So I wonder, in both of your opinions specifically, what strategies can be employed to bridge diverse theological perspective on environmental stewardship? And other than that, how can faith communities collectively mobilize their resources and influence to advocate for sustainable practices and policies that address the climate crisis effectively? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Zara. Any other questions? Comments? Yes. Dr. Rudy.
Thank you. I enjoy these conversations. I just want to ask Paul regarding the historical roots of our ecology crisis. I read this article in, I think, 1980s, and it blasts now, and up to now still debating on religion's role on the anthropogenic and anthropocene's structure. You mentioned regarding the Christianity influence, and at the sentence, the narrative of the article, I see Lynn White was also mentioned Islam, but he said Islam is Judeo-Christian heresy. I would like to comment in you as perhaps any perspectives on Islam up to now with 1.8 million people followers different than in 1960s. Maybe, what is your perspective?
Okay, can we have one more question? Yes, please do, Ibu. Name and affiliation, please.
Better I speak in bahasa.
Sure, no problem.
Ya, kami hadir berdua, Pak. Kebetulan Romo Martin Jinarut dari Bishop Conference of Indonesia. Maybe Romo Martin can introduce later after I speak here. And then, satu memang terima kasih for the invitation. So we are proud of you all, Professor Im and the other speaker. But hopefully, we can work work together to save our planet. Before, we have already cooperation with Dr. Farudin in Faith and Water Project. But better maybe next we come work together also. That's why I come here to present our religion, Catholic. Thank you.
Thank you. Romo, would you like to add anything? Please.
Here, come.
Tambahkan, Romo.
It was I'm very special, and I'm sorry, I first time to follow this discussion, so I have no comment for this material. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure Professor Paul Martins would be able to respond to some of these questions. Please, Paul.
Well, thank you. That's a series of wonderful questions, and as there's several things that Professor Azizan noted that deserve further comment as well. But let me begin with the historical roots comment. Look, I think to be honest, to much of Christian scholarship pre-1980, 1970, most Christians talked as if Islam was a kind of heretical form of Christianity. I think that's a historical reality that we would like to leave in the past, but there is a sense in which that's a reality that should be acknowledged. I take the Historical Roots article to be the uniqueness about Christianity that's the deep problem, is that Christians are separate from nature and are called to dominate nature, or at least be responsible for nature, which then becomes the language of domination because of the King James Version of the Bible, and that's the term that's used. And the problem with, and Christianity has a long legacy of repressing indigenous religions, and religions that threaten the separation between God and the world. And so what Lynn White names is a Christian attitude that separates Christians from the earth, or separates people from the earth, and aligns them more with God as creator, and aligns us with being able to use the earth for whatever means we think appropriate. So that's where the Christian problem lies. And he responds by saying, St. Francis is right. We need to be friends with the earth. And there are trajectories in Christianity that are much stronger in that respect. There's lots of debate about that with the historical accuracy of White's argument, but at a popular level, it's still probably right. This gets to the question of the relationship between religions and science. Yeah, historically, in the last couple of centuries, there's been a bit of a problematic relationship between science and religion, but it hasn't always been like that. And the medieval world was, I mean, the best science was done by people of faith, whether they were Islamic or Christian. So the science versus religion is a new phenomenon, historically speaking. And I think, and that's all to say, I am in no way opposed to what science has to say, and I think there has to be a deep dependence and a deep relationship and a conversation between the two. The difficulty is that science can only tell us what is. It's not in science that we get the language of justice or what we should do for one another. Now, science can tell us if we want to stop X, we can do Y, but it doesn't give us a reason why we should stop X. So why should we stop producing, say, carbon dioxide? Well, science can't tell us why. It can just say, well, this is the consequence of producing more carbon dioxide or whatever else whatever else we're polluting. Well, we're producing lots of things, but let's let that be the language we use. That's where we, as people of faith, can't give in to the conversation and simply accept, well, we need to stop X. We, as the issue for people is never the knowledge. We know what we should be doing in almost all parts of our life. It's not, when we do bad things, it's not because we know we shouldn't do them. We do them because we have desires or wills that override our knowledge. And that's where I think our biggest issue is, and that's the issue that religions speak to, our ultimate desires, the way in which we shape our desires relative to one another. And so when we talk about our communities, how can we maximize our resources of our communities, what I'd say is something like this. The primary issue isn't to inform people, although sometimes it is. The primary issue is to create communities that shape people in particular ways, which tendencies towards particular ways of being. So to have communities, I think to maximize the resources, is to develop communities, both families and then local communities and communities of faith, where people emerge with a deep concern for one another as part of their habits, virtuous, and to use that sort of language, rather than the ways in which all of us are shaped in many ways by the economic exchange that drives almost all of our lives. We're shaped by maximizing our return for our investment. That's the school we all go to every day. And that's the school that leads to, no matter what else we think, leads to desires that lead us down this path towards ecological destruction. And so that's where I don't have any animosity towards the scientific community or the UN. In many ways, the UN helps us to see the things that we should have seen in the first place. But I think as religious traditions, we have the resources, both historically and in the present, to address these things in ways that neither the economy or the UN have. So that's already way more than I wanted to say, but I hope that begins to answer.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, but I'll defer my comments later on after Professor A.M.'s answer.
Okay, maybe my answer lies on, so even though there has been many effort among a faith community to focus on the issues of environment, but there's still, of course, a challenge. And one of the findings in our study also, the challenges facing this movement are because they are still fragmented. Some of them focus more on certain area or certain issues, and they work in a small scale, and they do not have like more collaborative works, cooperation with other groups. So I think coordinations and also collaboration among this faith community is very important to enhance or to increase the impact of these movements. Like Paul also mentioned about inter-religious ethics can be established through intra-religious ethics. So among Green Islam movement, for example, among this Green Islam movement is also important to work together. Like, for example, they only focus on their own constituents. Like Muhammadiyah, they might focus on the Muhammadiyah members, or NU, they focus on NU, and other Islamic group like LDII maybe focus on their own community. So that's why they are still fragmented. So as I said, to enhance this, there need to be a consolidation and collaboration among these Green Islamic movement, and also with other religious groups, with inter-religious collaboration. I think it's important because, like, for example, in Catholic, Laudato Si, we care with our home. Home here, our earth. So home is one, so whatever your religions, the home, the earth is still the same. So yeah, interreligious collaboration also important to, again, to enhance the roles of a faith community in responding to the issues of climate change. And the other challenge is because this movement often focus on their own constituents or even focus on their members. So there's still challenge to socialize this movement into a broader context of the common populations. Like, and also in our survey, in our national survey, many of Muslim population, they do not really know what the green is. We do not use the term green Islam, of course, but we use several activities that this movement are doing, but many of Muslim population in Indonesia still don't know and don't familiar with these activities. So that's why it's important to expanding the issues or the movement into more broader context of the society in general. Hope I answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Aim. Well, one of the, I think, main arguments that, if you read carefully the Lynn White's thesis, is that the ecological crisis was preceded by the theological crisis, right? Meaning to say that many, in this case, the Christians got it wrong, right? In terms of their reading of the Bible, in terms of their reading of Genesis and Matthew's, more specifically on how humans were given the power to dominate the world and creation, essentially. So that was Lynn White's main sort of thesis. But this goes beyond Christianity. I mean, if you look at the work of Prasenjit Singh, for instance, he talks about this challenge of global modernity. And he talks about the crisis of transcendence. And this goes across all of the monotheistic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and other. But he did mention that there was in these religions particular traditions and forms of spiritualities and practices of spirituality, like Sufism in Islam, Vedanta in Hinduism, Jain in Buddhism, which are much more related, which are much more connected to this idea about, the earth, about the spiritual connections with nature, with culture, which you don't find in the more sort of formalistic forms of organized religions, especially the monotheistic religions. You see, and this is what Syed Hussain Nasr calls since the 1960s about this externalization of knowledge, that our intrinsic knowledge of creation, of nature, has been externalized. So there is no more that perennial wisdom, there is no more that intrinsic knowledge of who we are and what we are doing in this planet, right? And so you've got this externalization of knowledge, but you also have this desacralization of nature as a result of this loss of spiritual meaning and internalization of knowledge, yeah, or the intrinsic knowledge and spiritual realities. Okay, any other questions or comments, final ones? Okay, we have Mas Ubed here, who's a PhD candidate from Iran. And anybody else? Okay, and then I'll have Paul Martin add a few lines. Yes, go ahead, Mas Ubed.
Well, thank you, Pak Diki. I think this is a simple question. My question goes to my sister, Prof. Aim. You mentioned about the differentiation about the...
Closer to the mic, please.
Okay. Okay, directly, what are the theological basis or jurisprudence of both Muhammadiyah and NU and other religious affiliations in doing what you call green Islam? So you just mentioned about the focus, their focus, which is I think different there. So would you please to explore more about the comparatively in short? Thank you.
Yeah, even though they are Muslim, Islam, but again, they have a different theoretical basis. Like, based on our study, like among the Muhammadiyah, they tend to focus more human being is the center of everything. So their activities to protect environment actually will refer back to the human benefit. So the issues of anthropocentric perspective is still very dominant among Muhammadiyah. It's also confirmed, that's based on our qualitative study. It's also confirmed with our national survey. So we try to measures the level of anthropocentrism perspective, ecocentrism and theocentrism perspective among Muslim communities. And again, the finding shows that among Muhammadiyah, Muslim affiliated to Muhammadiyah, they tend to have more anthropocentric perspective higher than other Muslim group, either affiliated to NU or other Islamic groups. But some of the community also focus on what's so-called theocentrism, so how the relationship between human and nature is really depends on the God or theological God is very important. And actually, among the Muslim community, when we did the survey, the level of theocentrism among Muslim community is lower, the lowest one, compared to those who have the perspective anthropocentric and also ecocentrism. But if we compare among religious group, Muslim are among those with the highest level of theocentrism. I think the concept of Tawhid, the role of the importance of gods in Muslim society shape the way they see the environment and the relationship with the human being. So yeah, Tawhid is very important among these religious groups in constructing their perspective on the natures. Hope it's answering your question.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And my only worry, and something we haven't mentioned yet, but my only worry about the conversation we've had is that if we're worried about anthropocentrism and its difficulties, I think we're in for a world of hurt when we recognize that we're already in a world of technocentrism. Social media has displaced us from our local communities and our local world in ways that we're beginning to just realize, but AI is going to do this infinitely faster and infinitely further. So that's all to say that this conversation is not near over, and it's going to get even more difficult.
Thank you very much, Paul. And with that, I would like to close this seminar, and I'd like to please invite all of you to give a round of applause to our speakers. Okay, so thank you very much. I think I will now leave the event to be given back to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Diki Sofyan. Thank you to all the speakers for the insightful speeches and discussions. Maybe once again we can give them applause. Special thanks to Bapak Diki Sofyan, PhD, our moderator, for leading the engaging session. And before we proceed further, we would like to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to all the speakers and our moderator. We kindly invite the speakers here, Dr. Paul Martin and Professor Iim Halimatus Sa'diyah, and our moderator, Dr. Diki Sofyan, to come forward. And please, Bapak Dr. Fahrudin Mangunjaya to come forward also to give some souvenirs as our appreciation.
Dr. Paul here. Paul. Foto.
Untuk Profesor Iip. Sudah? Next, untuk Bapak Dr. Diki Sofyan. Ya. Sudah? Oh, take picture together.
Smile, please.
Sudah? Yeah. Thank you very much to our speakers, Dr. Paul Martin and Professor Im Halimatus Sa'diyah, and also Dr. Diki Sofyan as a moderator. And for Professor Dr. Dato Azizan Baharudin, we will send you the souvenirs to Malaysia. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of today's seminar. Once again, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for our speakers, moderator, our esteemed guests, and all participants for attending and contributing to this event. We hope that this seminar has provided valuable insights and inspirations for everyone. See you at our future events and have a wonderful day ahead. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
The ecological crisis may also stem from the fact that people of faith quickly feel at ease once their relationships with fellow humans have reached reconciliation or an ideal state and are free of conflict. They fail to delve deeper. They fail to go deeper, understand deeper into the reality